This is the Resolute Podcast, where we are discipling and developing men to live with conviction. I'm Vince Miller, your host, and today we are discussing obedience. Men, welcome back to the program. If this is your first time tuning in, then thank you for joining us. The Resolute Podcast is produced multiple times every week. We have Resolute study guides that go along with this podcast for your men's group, found on the website for members at beresolute.org. Come back often. Feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or in iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. All the links are on the homepage of the website. So let's dive in. Now, I'd assume that there are some guys out there who, as children, were, well, let's say a little bit more than disobedient, that we love to push the boundaries, break the rules, and do just about anything that we could do that was outside the parameters of the law. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, you little delinquents out there, and I wouldn't say I was too far behind you in some ways. But you know what? I think we come to learn over a period of time in our life that that's a pretty hard route, that by being disobedient, we discover that that can be pretty exhausting and painful at times in our own life. In fact, Jesus here in the text we're going to read today is going to encourage us to be obedient because he knows that we will travel the path of least resistance toward disobedience, and that is a painful teacher. And even though at times we will learn obedience through disobedience, Jesus wants to command us to live a different way. The words I'm going to read today are actually from Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 to 23. We're seated in the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is going to paint a beautiful picture of how we can live a more obedient life. Verse 13 begins by Jesus saying, "Enter the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit. But the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and then thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. Not every one of you who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father," pivotal phrase there, "who is in heaven. On that day many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Now, these are some fantastic words by Jesus because Jesus is trying to guide us into an understanding of what it means to live in obedience. He begins by painting two different paths. One is the path to obedience, and one is the path to disobedience. One path is narrow, the other's wide. One is hard, the other's easy. One few travel, one many travel. And he's just comparing the search process for obedient people. He's describing what the search process is like and how it is much different for the obedient that follows the commands of Jesus Christ than those who don't. And I believe that we understand this to be the truth. Jesus isn't saying anything that we don't already know, but he is doing one thing. He's commanding us to enter the narrow gate. That's really what he's doing here. It's almost declarative. Right at the beginning, enter by the narrow gate. It's as if Jesus is begging us to go the right way, not the wrong way, to go down the narrow path, enter the narrow gate, because he understands that there's another path that leads actually to destruction. Now, how do we end up on this path? Well, Jesus explains how we end up on this path. We end up on this path because we're following bad teachers, bad philosophies, the philosophies of this world. In fact, he commands us again to beware of false prophets. And how do we know who these false prophets are? Well, they bear bad fruit. The produce of their life doesn't look right. Their principles seem to work, but in the end, they don't. And when they don't, what are we supposed to do? Well, we're supposed to cut those trees down, to burn them, to have nothing to do with them. Because although they look good and they might initially be somewhat satisfying, we discover when we sink our teeth into them that they taste bad. They're not bearing good fruit. And why is this so critical? Well, this is critical because Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father, the obedient one who is following the Father, not following the world. Therefore, we have to use discernment to really understand obedience, because we don't want to be the guy who is standing at the pearly gates, who's saying, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then Jesus turned to us and say, I never knew you. Depart from me, you worker of lawlessness. Now the challenge is this, is that there's going to be many people standing at the judgment seat, many who are going to proclaim that they knew God, but they didn't. They followed the philosophies of the world. They followed false teachers, false prophets, false ways. And therefore, even though they may say with their lips they followed, they didn't really follow the way of Jesus Christ. Now, this great challenge for me and for you here is a challenge to understand how to live obedient. You know, obedience is just simply an action of submission or restraint to the command of authority of another. This means that even in our own life, that we are submitting ourselves not only in an attitude, but the actions that follow a submissive heart to Jesus Christ, meaning that we are going to have to engage the search process to understand what it means to be obedient. Jesus says in John 14, verse 15, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. Therefore, we have got to figure out what it means to live an obedient life, how to really build this obedience into our own heart. So as we begin to close off our time today, I want to give you 5 simple steps to really building obedience in your life in a real practical, pragmatic way. Here's the number one thing. The first thing that you can do to start to build obedience in your life is you can start with very small obediences. Start with small obediences. Just small little steps, things that you can do one little day at a time. For example, if you want to learn to be more obedient in your prayer life, don't start by praying an hour every day. Maybe you'll be able to do that, but that isn't a small step. Start with taking a small step by praying maybe 15 minutes throughout the entirety of the day. Not a lot, but a small obedience. Step 2, then with that, increase some frequency. The next thing you can do is start to do it multiple times during the day. So 15 minutes, multiple times every day. Third, you can add in some complexity by then saying, I'm going to do it multiple times different throughout the day in multiple different ways. I'm going to pray on my drive, but then I'm going to pray by writing out my prayers for 15 minutes. And then next you can add in, number 4, other context to your day. You can add in, I'm going to not only pray for 15 minutes today on my own, not only write out my prayers, but I'm going to pray with my family today. I'm going to pray with my spouse today. And then finally, step 5, obey when no one's looking. Pray in your prayer closet. Do you see how that works there? 5 simple steps to help us to build obedience in our life. Start with the small obedience, number 1. Number 2, increase the frequency of the obedience. Number 3, add in complexity. Number 4, apply to other contexts. Number 5, obey when no one's looking. You can really do this with anything in your life and it applies to any context. And I would challenge you to join me in that this week in some way. Because there's always some place in our life where we can grow in obedience. And gentlemen, we all need to do this in just small little ways. And by growing this obedience, we're not just trying here to grow our salvation or earn our salvation with Jesus Christ. We're trying to demonstrate a purity of motivation in doing this because we love Jesus Christ. Well, gentlemen, that's the show. Thanks for listening. Men, I want to encourage you to find a couple of other men to join in with you. Listening on your own is great, but finding a couple of other men to join in with you is even better. And here's why. Is because we can grow in obedience with other men when they challenge us and hold us accountable and help us to take those small steps of building obedience along the way. Guys, I want to strongly recommend our newest book entitled Convictions. It's designed to help you to move from being convicted toward living with conviction in your life with 4 factors that I believe will alter how you live the Christian life. It will change your obedience because each one of these chapters and factors comes with small group videos and discussion at the end of each chapter for you to use with other men. Just head to the website to purchase this book. So men, get off the bench. Get into the game. Start living out your obedience. If you ever want to email me, you can do so at info@beresolute.org. And until next time, I love you guys. I love you a lot. Stay with me, okay? And live in obedience. See you next time. And remember, be resolute.